My fellow Americans, welcome to The Celluloid President, the podcast about American presidents on film. Today we're discussing Pressure, a contemporary movie about Dwight D. Eisenhower and the D-Day invasion. I'm Gary Holmes, and joining me today via Zoom from California is Jim Robinson. Jim, this is basically a movie about a weatherman and a weather forecast. Do you have a favorite weatherman in real life or from fiction?
Well, I used to watch that cornball Willard Scott all the time when he was on the local Washington D.C. news when I lived there,
Yeah.
and then he went national with the Today Show. But mostly, I feel sorry for meteorologists. It's a field being made obsolete by AI. What do I need talking heads for when I can find out to the exact minute when a rain shower is going to start and when it's going to end?
My favorite weather person, I guess I've already started off politically incorrect here by talking about a weatherman, but my favorite weather person is Bill Murray in Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's a great movie, but he's a real jerk until he learns to be caring and sympathetic by repeating the same day over and over. So I would go with him. My backup would be Steve Carell, who's very funny as the weatherman in the movie Anchorman.
Okay. All right. So you
So
don't feel sorry for them. You still laugh at them.
I do feel sorry for them, and I will tell you that I just saw, like, yes, this weekend I saw the movie Closure Day, and the protagonist is a weather woman who's the one that's I don't know, in touch with the aliens somehow.
Oh boy.
So anyway, so Jim, I've just returned from our college reunion, and shout out to everyone who was there, who was so supportive of our podcast. We actually have fans among our classmates. You couldn't make it from California. You'd be surprised at how many people our age listen to podcasts, and also how many have forgiven us for being conservatives.
Well, they have very good taste. I will give them that. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That's
So,
great.
hello everyone. Tell your friends in the class to subscribe to us. Well, we have finally have an opportunity to discuss one of our favorite Americans, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Jim, I know you like Ike. What's to like?
Oh, don't get me started, but I'll start anyway. In one of his early songs, Street Life Serenader, Billy Joel called himself a child of Eisenhower. And I feel that way myself. He was perfect for the times. He presided over nearly a decade of peace and plenty. He was wise and judicious with presidential power, deliberate in decision making. He wasn't given enough credit, in my view, on civil rights. His appointees helped produce the landmark school desegregation ruling in 54. He desegregated Washington, D.C., created the first civil rights division at DOJ, sponsored the first civil rights bill since Reconstruction, was the first to make a national TV address on civil rights, and the first to send federal troops to enforce a desegregation order. By the way, several of those accolades are usually granted to his successor, when in fact it was Ike that broke the ground there. He also created NASA, the Interstate Highway System, the St. Lawrence Seaway. He kept us out of war and refused proposals by his military chiefs to deploy ground troops in Asia and even to use tactical nukes. The list goes on and on and on.
Okay. Well, you talked mostly about his presidential attributes, which
Yes.
are good. Conservatives generally are not as enthusiastic as you are about Ike. A lot of the things that you talked about were expansions of government policy, and he did not do much to roll back taxes or any of the regulations that have been put in place by the New Deal. But I take your point, but I also go on to say I think regardless of him being president, I think he's one of the greatest Americans of the 20th century. Born into a very modest circumstances in Kansas, and he rose to prominence on the basis of hard work, talent, and personality. He embodied everything we tell ourselves that's good in America: decency, intelligence, egalitarianism. And he was president when America was at the pinnacle of its power. No country in world history, not even Rome or Imperial Britain, so dominated the world economically or militarily as America did in the 1950s. He was an old-fashioned conservative. He didn't rock the boat, didn't make any mistakes, and presided over a roaring economy.
Yeah, but as warm as my heart is for him, I do have to say he's he was really a president of a bygone era. We expect far more glossy performance art today. One thing he did is he didn't make us have to think about the president every single day and every single hour, um, compared to some others I might mention. When he had a heart attack during his presidency, and it happened out in Colorado, he recuperated out there for weeks without returning to the White House. And guess what? The country was just fine.
Well,
So,
there's yeah,
it
no,
was just a different time, but who knows if we went back to that kind of style, who knows but that the country would still be just fine.
well, yeah. I mean, he used to take these like month-long vacations, so he'd go out golfing and fly fishing, and I mean, he'd be out of commission for a month, and no one really cared that much. And you're right, we did go along fine. I think his reputation with historians is not as high as it should be because he's so closely associated with the 1950s, which liberals, hippies, and radicals rebelled against in the 60s. It's
Yeah.
seen as too conformist and too focused on families in the suburbs. Also, Ike was considered to have boring middlebrow tastes like Zane Grey novels. And he just was looked sneered at and looked down on by a whole generation of New York intellectuals. And I think his reputation has suffered for it.
Yeah, yeah. There are some other almost odd or touching qualities that he had. He went over the budgets when he was in the White House with a green eye shade, and he was particularly tough on the Pentagon
Yeah.
because, after all, here's a guy who knew all the tricks and all the chicanery that could go on the part of the brass. He actually personally edited his Secretary of State's major speeches. There was, so he was very engaged. Sometimes he's portrayed as aloof and out of touch. And he also made a big speech of his own, let's not forget,
Mhm.
his farewell address, which I think across the board of parties and philosophies people praise, where he warned about the growth of the military industrial complex. And lesser remembered is he also warned about letting technology come into too much power over our lives. So very, very prophetic in that sense. And by the way, he also rode around his entire presidency in an open car through the streets of America, Europe, and third world cities. So, like I say, it's a bygone era.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. All right. So the movie we're talking about today is Pressure. I believe you have a summary. You can tell us the people what this movie is, because I don't think very many people have seen it, and maybe not many people know about it. It just came out, and it's already out of the theaters. So what's the movie about?
Well, Pressure covers the 72 hours leading up to D Day in June 1944. It follows Allied Supreme Commander General Eisenhower, played by Brendan Fraser, and meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg, played by Andrew Scott, as they face a critical high stakes decision. With the fate of the Normandy invasion hanging in the balance, they must choose whether to launch the largest and most dangerous seaborne invasion in history amid very uncertain weather, or delay it and risk losing the war. The story centers on the intense pressure in the war room, conflicting forecasts, military tensions, including Ike's tension with figures like General Bernard Montgomery, and the human weight of the choice. To the chagrin of the other generals, Eisenhower scratches the original plan to launch on June 5th, even though the weather appears perfect. He and meteorologist Stagg are vindicated when the weather that day suddenly turns very violent and would have basically destroyed the invasion. Equally risky, they notice a break in the bad weather which offered just enough time to land on June 6th. And Ike gives the go ahead without flinching. And therein lies the reason June 6th is the day we will always observe, while June 5th is a nothing burger. It's a character driven film focused more on strategy, weather forecasting, and leadership than battlefield action. However, we are not spared some horrific scenes through both real and theatrically produced footage of what was basically a massacre of so many young Americans and others who had the misfortune of being the first to land on the shores of France. The film is based on the successful West End play called Pressure by David Haig, who also co-wrote the screenplay.
I think D-Day is probably the greatest day in American history in the 20th century. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think they can make enough movies about it, to be honest with you. But I have to say that this movie opened on May 29, just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks in a weekend. My wife and I saw it in the first day. There were only about 20 people in the theater, and it ended up being the eighth most watched movie that day with a box office of 2.5 million. It's already out of the theaters. It ended up with a domestic box office of 14 million and another million internationally for a worldwide total of 15 million. In other words, it's another movie about a president that's a flop. So
Maybe.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what
There's
the
a lot.
budget was, but I remember listening to some forecasts earlier in the spring, and that they were expecting this to do better. It's a
Yeah, there,
decent movie. I don't understand why it was made. Dads and grandfathers are famously interested in World War II, but those guys don't go to the movies these days. If this had been a Netflix limited series, I would have understood that. Do you think the two of us should run a movie studio and straighten everyone out about what should be a movie and what should be a TV series? And,
I don't know how to judge why, some movies are made and some movies aren't. All I know is that there are a lot of people out in the world making a lot of content,
yeah.
and not every movie has to be a superhero blockbuster. What's wrong with a movie that is of what I consider to be pretty high quality and about an important series of events, but taking kind of a new slant on it and starring some good actors and making a few coins instead of a few billions. And I think it's too early to tell whether this is actually a bona fide flop yet, because it's just going on as we speak in the next day or so on the video on demand market. And so we'll see. But I just, I'm not sure we should judge box office based on as to whether or not a film, should have been made or not. I mean, let the studios make those cutthroat decisions. We should just enjoy.
Yeah, I guess I'm like a fan who thinks the manager's not doing a very good job and could do a better job, could make better decisions on when to pull a pitcher or put in a pinch hitter. Uh, and the truth is that neither you nor I are in a position to know whether a movie is profitable or not, because there's the budget plus there's the marketing costs offset by
the
uh,
chicanery, the
well,
chicanery of Hollywood accounting
yeah,
too.
yeah. But also, they make movie, box office is one way they make back their receipts. And then the other, and then what is video on demand, and then there's whatever licensing there is to Netflix or Amazon, or whoever. But there are movies that definitely make a lot of money right from the box office, and this just happens not to be one. I'm not
Right.
speaking to the quality of the movie itself because I like it a lot. Well, let's talk about what you liked about the movie.
Well, naturally, I liked that it showed Eisenhower to be the hero I believe him to be, a man under unbelievable pressure with so many lives in his hands, making the tough decisions. That's why the title Pressure is such a double entendre. Pressure is not just something you measure with a barometer. I like the suspense it was able to create out of something seemingly as mundane as the weather, It moved along briskly. I was never bored. The production, the music, the cinematography, the acting were all at least of above average quality in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I mean, I didn't expect, to be honest with you, I didn't expect to like this movie because, when we saw that Reagan movie, that was not very good, and I thought this was going to be something like that. But it was definitely higher quality than the Reagan movie, and more compelling, better directed and acted than I expected. And it held my interest as well. And I was also impressed that they were able to build the tension, even though we all know the outcome. The fact
Yeah.
that they held the invasion for one day because of the weather is pretty well known, but I didn't know anything about the disputes between the meteorologists. And that's what led to the dramatic tension.
Yeah. And I like that. I think I kind of referenced this in my summary. I like that it didn't sugarcoat the massacre that happened and when for the guys that landed first on the
Yeah.
beaches.
Yeah.
They could have made the mistake of keeping it insular, especially as it was a play to begin with, keeping it insular and trying to make us feel oh so sorry for the big generals that were ensconced safely in their headquarters. But they didn't, and we got to see, I thought, very dramatically, without overdoing it, just what an awful thing it was to be in that landing party. I mean, my gosh, your chances were so slim of making it.
I liked that it did not hint or imply that Ike and Kay Summersby were lovers. Kay Summersby, of course, was Ike's Irish driver, a female, young woman that people have assumed were lovers for a long time. The relationship between the two of them is close, but not physical. Although I have to say, I don't know how they could have even had a physical relationship in this particular time because everyone up to and including Ike seems to be sleeping in tents without much privacy.
Well, yeah, she's an interesting character. I think there's no doubt it was a very intense, personal, intimate relationship.
Yeah.
But and historians have veered back and forth on it, and most historians now feel that it was not a sexual relationship. There's one historian who says there was one fumbled attempt at sex, but Ike had a sort of a guilt-ridden attack of impotence that prevented it. That's what one historian has concluded. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and you don't like to consider those things anyway, except when Kennedy's involved. Then you automatically assume all the salacious stories of sex are
Well,
true.
the idea that they might have had an affair gained a lot of traction when Bill Clinton was accused of sexually abusing multiple subordinates. And basically, the argument was they all do it, as if there's no difference between Clinton's multiple predatory activities and what is the worst allegation against Ike, which is that he had a close relationship with another woman when he was away from his wife for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, there is the little inconvenient fact that she wrote a memoir
Yeah,
strongly suggesting that there
yeah,
was a sexual relationship, but she even scaled that back before her death. I think it was definitely a dependency in a good way
yeah.
on Ike's part. And if I were the wife in this equation, I might have been more concerned about the relationship they actually had than if it had been just a sexual thing.
The reason I think it might have been sexual is that apparently when the war was over and he left, he never got in touch with her again.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing you do when you feel like there's been something guilty's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to airbrush it away.
But
Let me tell you what I like the most about this
yeah,
film is that it's more of a leadership, lessons in leadership film than a war film, which is why I think people should see it, even if they're not particularly interested in World War II or didn't have a grandfather that was in within shouting distance of D-Day. I mean, look at all it's brimming over with very important lessons, whether you're leading a company or leading a team of people or sports team or a president. It's that the experts will often disagree, so the leader has to make the tough call between experts. A real leader takes responsibility for failure as well as success. Leaders need to keep people of differing opinions around. Leaders need to brush off insults when the mission requires it, even barbs from General Montgomery. Leaders need to deal with data over emotion. They need to understand that in hierarchical structures, the temptation is very strong for their underlings to suck up and tell them exactly what they want to hear. And finally, leaders understand that fate, the weather, and God, if one so believes, can have their say no matter how brilliant your plans are. I really like that about. I think that was a very important takeaway from this movie.
No, no, I agree. I agree with that. In fact, I'm going to talk about leadership in another category. So
Good.
I'll save
Sure.
my agreement with you until then. I just have one more thing that I like to call out, which is, I like the way at the end there that they replicated some of the most famous photos from the day of the invasion, including, Ike shaking hands with the troops
Right.
and the scenes of the landing on the beach, which are just like Robert Capa photos come to life.
Yeah, that choked me up.
Oh yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, it was
the
very
last 10 minutes
emotional.
are very emotional. Yeah.
Yes. I have to mention one more thing too,
Okay.
because to get it off my chest. I think this movie is a dramatic reminder to modern day audiences what genuine tough times are really
Oh
like.
yeah.
That in comparison to what people had to go through in World War II, whether it's the foot soldiers, the generals, the presidents, civilians being bombed out of their homes, or hundreds of thousands of families getting telegrams telling them their 19-year-old sons were dead, all that makes what we're going through today seem like peanuts, just peanuts. So
Yeah.
maybe stop with so much catastrophizing.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more there. Now, what is there anything you didn't like?
Yeah, it I thought it made the Americans, except for Ike, look a little too frivolous, a little and petty and unimaginative. It probably over dramatized the difference in thinking and quality of the British weathermen and the American weathermen. The culture clash there, I thought, was a little too stock and stereotypical.
No, that was one of my answers too. I didn't like that they made Crick in particular. He's
The
the
American.
American meteorologist, is played like a typical arrogant American. He's so obnoxious that it just made me cringe. Although
Yeah.
apparently he actually was a piano player in real life.
Hmm.
So the first time we see him, he's playing the piano. But
Well, yeah.
I will say though, although to be fair, they also make General Montgomery, Ike's counterpart, look like a typical egomaniac British general. So there's a symmetry. You've got this Eisenhower, the American, and Stagg, the Brit, both have obnoxious counterparts from the other country. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
there's one good American and one bad American, and there's one good Brit and one bad Brit. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
anything else
Well, I think the whole conceit that was implied, if not outright suggested, that we literally would have lost the war but for a break in the weather on June 6th, I think is exaggerated. By mid 1944, the Germans were already starting to gasp their last breaths. The Russians didn't need to cross any channel to march toward Berlin, and our relentless bombing, which included mass bombing of civilians in German cities, would have sooner or later carried the day. So, this idea that there would be a Nazi Europe were it not for D-Day, I think historically is probably is exaggerated. And yeah, the war might have dragged on a good deal longer, just like it would have dragged on longer with Japan if we hadn't dropped the nuclear bomb. But the idea that the literal outcome would have been totally different, I think, is a wrong conclusion to draw from this.
No, I think you're right at that point that we were definitely going to win the war one way or another, just because
Yeah.
the Germans were surrounded. We destroyed a lot of they're smaller, I mean, population wise, than Britain and the United States and Russia combined. So they would have, but I mean, I've been thinking about this too. If the war had lasted longer, who knows how far the Russians would have gotten. I mean, as it was, they had
Right.
all of Eastern Europe. Um, and if we hadn't gotten over there when we did, it might not be German that Europe was speaking. It might have been Russian.
Right, right. I do have to say, we'll talk about Fraser later,
Yeah,
but I did have trouble getting over his bulkiness,
yeah,
whereas Eisenhower is more sinewy.
yeah.
And so that was a sort of a roadblock for me of sorts.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, we can talk about that.
yeah,
Get to that part. One thing I didn't like, and this is often the case in historical dramatizations, I didn't like the scenes that were so patently obvious fabrications for dramatic effect. Like the scene where it starts rain, when it's a beautiful day, they
right,
go to church, and all of a sudden, boom, it starts pouring
right,
rain. And you know, but both Ike and Stag, they go outside and they're standing there in the middle of the rain, like they're looking at each other, not saying anything, like they're in a rom-com or something. So that's so corny, that kind of scene. And also, there was a corny situation there where after Stagg's American adversary, Irving Crick has been humiliated by making such a bad prediction that unfortunately no one listened to. Stagg goes to him and asks for help because he feels sorry for him or something, and the two of them immediately go from worst enemies to best buddies. I guess this is supposed to be a feel-good moment, but to me, it was obviously manipulative. And don't get me started on the pregnant wife. I mean, a lot of the dramatic flourishes were just obviously made up. So,
well, we'll talk.
and I mean,
You just described a couple of my favorite scenes,
okay.
but
I know these were great. These are good
that's
scenes,
always
but
the case, isn't it? The
yeah,
made up
where the
scenes
stuff. Yeah, we've talked about this ever since the Churchill movie, where he goes down in the
yeah,
subway. Now that's a
yeah.
great scene, but like it was preposterous that
Well,
would
that's
happen.
why we go to the movies and don't just dwell in real life.
Right. All right. So, in terms of what the movie's trying to accomplish, this is where I was going to say that I think the movie is ultimately about leadership. There's
Yes.
Eisenhower who insists that he'll make his own decision based on the best advice he gets. He's even willing to overrule his own trusted advisor, Mr. Crick there, and he takes responsibility for it. And then there's Stagg. He too insists on his responsibility to make the final recommendation. And although he's right, he initially won't work with Crick or allow him to present an alternative opinion to Ike because, as chief meteorologist, he's supposed to make the final recommendation. So it's sort of an echo. What Stagg does is an echo of what Ike did. He says he's the boss. He'll make the final decision. But there's a difference between making a yes no decision and making a recommendation. Um,
Yeah.
and so later, when Crick's been humiliated as an arrogant amateur, Stagg welcomes Crick back to the team. And although I've said I thought this was phony, it is what a good leader will do. They'll be able to build a united team, bring everyone together, unify people. So that's how the movie presents it, even though I don't think it actually happened that way. But they do that to make a point of what a leader does, and to show what leadership is all about. It invents some scenes to illustrate what good leadership is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that was one of the key accomplishments they strove for and achieved. I mean, it tried to show that history can turn on great men making big decisions under incredible pressure, but at the same time, showing that all the best laid plans of men and women can be thrown out the window by things beyond our control, like the weather. And so I think the pairing of those two dynamics, you know, strong leaders making big decisions under big pressure, and yet these little things just get in the way, no matter um, how genius you are and the plans you've made. I think
Oh,
that was
yeah.
the
So,
accomplishment. That was what it was trying to accomplish.
yeah. Okay. I think they did a good job of showing that they talk that's the fog of war. This is
Yeah.
this is the hurricane of war. All right, well, let's talk about the actors. So Brendan Fraser plays Ike. He started out in comedies like Encino Man and George of the Jungle. And his career seemed stalled until he made a comeback in serious dramas, and he even won an Academy Award for Best Actor as the title character in The Whale, in which he acted from inside an enormous fat suit. You've already begun to talk about what you thought about him, so want to elaborate that?
Yeah, the trouble, I mean, I thought he also deliberately gained weight for making when he made the whale.
Yeah, he gained weight and then they
Yeah,
piled on. I mean, no one could have gained
yeah,
that much weight.
yeah. I thought maybe he should have lost a few more of those pounds back before playing Eisenhower, but that notwithstanding, I thought he was very good. The facial expressions, the clipped way of talking, the occasional outbursts of temper, which were Ike, um, I thought were all spot on. And I was distracted by his bulk, but I found him totally believable. And of course, he very wisely, historically, he was smoking all the time,
Right.
which Eisenhower was a voracious smoker. After the war, Eisenhower quit all this just suddenly, just like that. And he was asked, "How did you do that? And when it's so difficult for so many others?" And Eisenhower said, "I gave myself an order."
Yeah, apparently he was smoking 4 packs a day.
Yeah, but
Um,
I thought Fraser was very good, and what I've read is that um, disappointing box office notwithstanding, this is actually seen as a kind of a comeback film for him because of it being well received. His
well, I mean, it's
performance.
hard. He just won the Academy Award 2 years ago, so I mean,
No, but then he made a couple of stinkers, I think, since
yeah.
then.
I thought he was. I thought he was fine. I mean, adequate even. This my problem is that Eisenhower was very charismatic, and for me that didn't come through. Fraser's Eisenhower is angry a lot. He never smiles. Half of Eisenhower's success was that he had such a great smile he could persuade people to do his bidding. You don't really see the conciliatory Eisenhower here. He just sort of barks at people and says, I'm gonna make the decision." But one thing that's right is we see, as you said, we do see Eisenhower smoking a lot, and it's no wonder he had 2 heart attacks when he was president
Right. And a stroke.
and a stroke. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the country was still just fine.
he was just fine, and he wasn't even. Yeah, I mean, he was a young man. He was only in his 60s,
Yeah. And
so
Richard Nixon had to wait,
had
had to
to
wait
wait. Yeah, another 10 years
longer than
after
he
that.
thought.
All right, Andrew Scott. He's most famously the hot priest in the award-winning TV show Fleabag, and he also played Professor Moriarty in Sherlock. Is James Stagg? He, not Ike, is the real protagonist of the movie. What do you got?
I thought he was very good. He played the arrogant, icy, and control of his emotions character Brit well, and then later shows generosity and warmth and some emotion. His character actually had an arc to it, and I thought even though some of it was a little too facile, as you suggested, um, I thought he performed it quite well.
I think what they were actually showing him, it was showing as a transition, is that as the movie went on, he became more American, right? Because he
Mm-hmm.
starts off being like real hardcore upper
Craig.
prig, yeah. I mean, I'm like classic poker up your ass kind of guy,
Yeah.
and like Montgomery even. But then as the movie goes on, he becomes less and less authoritarian, and at the end, he's not even wearing a tie when he's briefing those guys. He's just like staggering down the hall, and he says things like, "I know none of you like me." It's like, like not even a good American would say something like that back then. He's a very good actor. And since we don't know Stagg, we can't really say whether this was an accurate portrayal. We do know that Stagg was at least 6 inches taller than Andrew Scott. The movie goes out of its way to show Eisenhower towering over Stagg, when in reality, Stagg was taller than Ike.
Hmm.
By the way, this is the fourth time that Stagg has been portrayed in the movies. He was also seen in The Longest Day, in the movie called Churchill, and also in Ike Countdown to D-Day. I haven't seen The Longest Day. We should do that sometime.
Oh, yeah, you should.
And maybe two or three D-Days from now. Okay, Carrie Condon as Kay Summersby, Ike's trusted aide. My guess is they beefed up her role so there'd be at least one woman with a big part. Um,
Yeah,
I doubt
yeah.
she interacted with Stagg as much as the movie depicts, and I'm 1000% sure she never offered to drive to the hospital to see how Stagg's wife was doing, because, among other things, she was not delivering a baby in the hospital that had been bombed, or in any hospital at all, because she didn't have that baby until much later. Having said that, I think her job in the movie is to soften Eisenhower, and I think she succeeds with that. Do you think so too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wasn't crazy about it, but you needed a woman in the cast, and she was a real life figure. She was there
Hmm.
at the in the war rooms and at the headquarters, and she was doing more than just driving him or, typing up something. I mean, so there's enough reality there. I thought she was well cast. She's Carrie Condon's Irish, like the real Kay Summersby, and they were of similar age. Of course, Carrie has it over Kay Summersby in the looks department, but that's Hollywood, and we want that. So I thought she was okay. She was fine. So we sort of have opposite reactions. I thought she was just fine, and you liked her, whereas I thought Fraser was excellent, and you thought he was just fine. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
On the Lycometer, we have a few differences here.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we need to mention Damian Lewis as Bernard Montgomery. Damian Lewis became famous as Major Richard Winters in the HBO series Band of Brothers, which of course has a very famous D-Day scene in it. Um, then he was Nicholas Brody in Homeland, King Henry VIII of England in Wolf Hall. He was also in Billions, and he appeared in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as the actor Steve McQueen.
Mhm. I really
Um,
liked him. I really liked him here. His, I mean, he was kind of chewing the scenery. His
yeah,
his
yeah,
facial expressions were great. He was having a good time with the role, and I thought it was kind of a relief to see him in the film and add some not quite comedic, but almost comedic element. I wanted more. I wanted more.
yeah. I mean, it's a small but vivid part because Montgomery is such a re or so already Montgomery himself was already a caricature in real life, and it's hard to overdo it, you know. So,
Yeah.
he was an egomaniac and careless with the lives of his men, and we see it here when he wants us to launch the invasion, even though the forecast is for a terrible storm, and he tries to tell Stagg to give him a good recommendation, even though a million people are going to get killed. It was bad enough as it
Right.
is. Can you imagine?
Oh, I know. I know. Well, it would have failed probably.
Yeah. What do you have any other actors you want to talk
That
about?
was, I thought it was like a theater troupe
Yeah.
of acting because it was a play originally. And I thought that it was all good. I mean, Chris Messina as the American weatherman was fine. I thought the acting was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, the acting was
Yeah.
fine. I mean, as you said, everything in the movie was basically pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn to the history or the accuracy. D-Day is one of the most widely written about events in modern history, and the 4 days covered in this movie are heavily scrutinized. Uh, what is your, I mean, we could have, I went back and read some things in my Eisenhower books, just to see how they comport with this. And it's funny, none of the books that I was reading talk much about the weather forecast. So what is your take on how accurate
Well,
it is?
I, Eisenhower wrote his own book
Yeah.
called Crusade in Europe, which is where he does discuss the weather.
Okay.
And it's a very interesting book for those that really want to get into this.
We
But
had that
written in,
book. We had that book, and then his a biography about the president in at my mother. We didn't have a lot of books in our house, but
yeah,
it was right there on the bookshelf, and I looked at it for years, and I've never seen it again, but did
It's
you?
fairly dry. I read
Yeah.
it. It made him a rich man, by the way. I mean, his royalties were stupendous that he received on it. But it basically, I agree with those that say um, that this movie is actually quite accurate for the focus that it's presenting. So if you want a wider focus of the whole D-Day, you really should watch The Longest Day, which was I think the biggest money maker of any black and white film in history. Had every single Hollywood star you can even think of in
Yeah.
it playing cameos, and that had a much wider focus. It was also more Hollywood in terms of its stock characterizations and phrasing. But I thought this was very accurate. The weather really was an overriding factor in whether to launch D-Day, whether and when. There really were disputes among the meteorologists, though probably over dramatized. The characters portrayed are real people. So they took some licenses, but generally, I think for what it was trying to focus on, um, which was what day to go on based on the weather, I thought it was very accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's from a very high 20,000 foot level. I think it was accurate in the sense that, they needed a good weather forecast. And then they postponed and then they went forward. I think they've got the drama backwards though. As far as I can understand, the conflict wasn't over whether to delay the invasion, but to proceed once Stagg identified the gap. Everyone could see that the storm was coming. Even the Germans, who let their guard down. Famously, Rommel was in Germany for his wife's birthday because he thought the weather would be too tough for the Allies to attack. But it was the break in the storm that was gutsier to predict and more, when they had this narrow gap where Stagg said it was okay to go. That's, I think, when they had the real back and forth arguments about whether to invade or not.
Yeah, the gutsy, you're right. The gutsier decision. Well, it's always less gutsy to delay something, isn't it? but
Well, yeah,
but
exactly.
the real gutsy decision was thinking that a temporary break in terrible weather, that you could time your landings just enough to make a successmesuccessful landing. I
Yeah,
think
there's
you're
that.
right about that.
Yeah.
But
There's this detail in there too where they get a meteorological barometric pressure reading from some woman in Ireland, and and apparently it was true. That's exactly what happened. This woman called in a 21-year-old woman called in the lowering or high rising barometer, and they went. And so, so there was a lot of detail that was actually was accurate.
yeah, and then you and I have both basically admitted that we haven't really ourselves focused on the role of the weather when thinking about and talking about D-Day in terms of when to launch. And so I think this movie does serve an important historical purpose in highlighting that.
Yeah,
I
yeah, no,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So
it's a lot of what happens in history is based on things that we don't really think about very much and that are beyond human control.
yeah,
I'm going to say that almost all the details, though, the story has been modified for dramatic effect. Stagg had been working with Eisenhower for months, not days. He didn't come in as an outsider at the last minute. Uh, there was no debate in front of the command staff between Stagg and Crick about their different approaches to weather forecasting. Stagg's wife was pregnant, but she didn't go into labor until much later. It's one of these classic Hollywood movies where, it's accurate. It's dramatic enough as it is, but Hollywood wants to like pile on all these little subplots that make things more interesting. And you either like that or you don't.
yeah. I don't think they did it to great excess here, though. I just the hospital thing. The hospital was bombed, but she wasn't in it at the time, and
Yeah.
she was pregnant, so they took some license. I'm also, they also took some license in having Ike personally be present during the failed dry run that opened the movie. There was a dry
All
run
right.
of what the invasion would be at the opening, and lives were unnecessarily lost um, in that practice run. But the movie showed Ike standing sort of in view of the bodies lying on the beach,
Yeah.
which I understand was not the case. And tell me if I imagine this or not. Was his first line in the movie as he was witnessing the bleeding, dying soldiers in that practice run? Didn't he say F me?
I don't know.
I
I
think
didn't.
that was his opening. I
Yeah.
think that's, which is a very more modern expression.
Yeah.
To add the me on the end of the F bomb is a
Yeah.
very modern, younger person's kind of expression, not something Eisenhower would have ever said. Not both words together, anyway.
Yeah. All right. Um, I don't know, as long as we're talking about American history, I thought it might be interesting to look at some other important events in which the weather affected the outcome. Did you come up with
Oh
any?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
November 22nd, 1963.
Okay.
It was raining in Texas that morning, but the weather cleared up just in time after JFK got to Dallas. So there was no need to have the bubble top on top of JFK's limo. That bubble top wasn't bulletproof, but it might have presented just enough of a deflection or an obstacle for the three gunmen to miss. But seriously, whether there's one gunman or not or more, um, that could have changed that whole
Absolutely.
dynamic.
I mean,
You
it
know,
had to be such a perfect shot that
yeah.
it just,
And it was raining all that morning.
I mean, if it was raining, I don't see how you would have been able to take the shot like that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
one
I,
I have.
Yeah, all right. I've got the Battle of Long Island in 1776, in which a providential fog allowed Washington's army to escape across the East River after a near catastrophic defeat in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
allowing avoiding capture or destruction. I mean, this is quite a one of these. You almost have to think that God was, involved in this. Washington had been completely defeated in at Brooklyn, and his army was, on the beaches waiting to be killed, and the British waited until overnight to attack. And during the middle of the night, this fog rolled in, and the whole American army was able to cross over back to Manhattan, and they escaped. So
Wow, wow, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Yeah, I've got another one.
okay,
How about the brilliant blue, beautiful, clear skies over the eastern seaboard on 9/11?
well, yeah,
I mean, I don't know if those pilots were instrument trained, but what if it had been low, overcast, raining that day?
yeah,
Would they have hit their targets? Would they have scrubbed the mission and waited and maybe got caught in the meantime?
yeah,
Anyway, everyone
yeah.
keeps commenting on what a beautiful day it was.
It
Well,
sure was.
that probably had something to do with the outcome.
Yeah. I don't know. This is one, not a specific event. It was a multi-year event, but the Dust Bowl, uh,
Yeah.
decades of drought across the Great Plains, compounded by poor farming practices, displaced hundreds of thousands of families and shaped New Deal policy, migration patterns, and even American literature. I mean, that's what Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath was written about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how about the weather? The weather causing the whole putting the entire LAX, Los Angeles airport, underwater by the year 2005, which was Al Gore's prediction. So we can't forget those terrible weather outcomes.
All right, all right. Let's talk about our favorite scenes. Again, my favorite scenes, your favorite scenes are ones that were, did not happen in real life. So let's talk about them.
Well, they might have happened sort of and
Sort of.
partially, but I love the tension-filled scenes in the war room, especially the penultimate scene where the weathermen are fighting it out. The other generals want to go on June 5th, and Ike makes a tough decision to delay. I thought the whole thing was really well staged and acted.
Yeah, I like the scene, completely fictional, where Kay Summersby comforts Stag after he's been yelled at by Ike at a time when no one knows whether Stag's wife is alive. It's very sweet and comforting scene. You get this lovely British lady comforting this bereft British guy, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's very sweet. I like the scene. Again,
Good.
not didn't happen, but it was nice.
How do you know it didn't happen, by the way? Are
I,
you absolutely sure?
his wife was not in the hospital, and they didn't know if that she was, his wife
Yeah.
was not in the hospital, and he knew that he wasn't worried about her being bombed by the Brits, by the Germans.
Well, except the bombs were falling in
Yeah,
his
yeah.
city.
Do you have any? What other favorite scene you got?
I like the well, we already mentioned this, but the whole ending is a choke
Yeah,
up time.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very emotional, showing the actual invasion. I think that was very important to the movie so that it wasn't just a drawing room drama in the war rooms. And then with Eisenhower's voiceover explaining what was at stake as you saw the actual or saw the invasion actually happen.
Yeah, no,
It's very moving.
I had listed that as one of my the final 10 minutes of the movie where the D-Day launches. I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's on my favorite scene. I also liked the scene where Stagg, finally explains why his forecasts are better than Crick's, pointing out that Crick has been lucky in his predictions in North Africa, where the weather hardly ever changes. It's kind of annoying that he hadn't done this sooner. Even I know that predicting the weather in the desert is easier than places like England or New England, for that matter. I mean, like, why didn't Stagg just like say it from the beginning? Like your predictions about your are garbage. I mean, his predictions were all based on the idea that this happened once before. It rained one day and then the next day it was better, and that happened 5 years ago, so that will happen again. And Stagg was right to say,
Yeah.
that doesn't work. What worked in North Africa is not going to work in England.
Yeah. I did like this. I did like the scene in the church where all the high and mighty generals were singing. It was kind of a brought them together. Montgomery was there,
Yeah.
Eisenhower was there, and it was pure Hollywood. And then the way the sunny day, all the things you were complaining that were manipulated, I enjoyed as a film audience member. Sunny
Yeah,
day turning violent, proving one man right and one man wrong, and seeing their different reactions. I like the way it all unfolded.
yeah. I mean, I,
Yeah,
I, I certainly enjoy being manipulated in the movies as much as anyone. It just has to be more realistic for me sometimes. You have anything else?
not on
All right,
scenes.
let's talk about our favorite lines then.
Well, it wasn't easy because we're sitting in a theater watching
I
it.
know
So,
I had a
so
very hard
we
um
can't pause it.
I
We
can't
can't
pause
rely
it,
on
rerun it,
subtitles. So,
put
but
subtitles. Yeah, play the
I like
subtitles back.
I like the understated some of Eisenhower's spare, sparse, but evocative lines, like when he's told there's a break in the going to be a break in the stormy weather on June 6th, and he falls silent for just a second and then just says, "Okay, we'll go."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of like shows his leadership style.
In the scene we were talking about earlier with Kate Summersby comforting Stagg, he says, most weathermen are boring. No, he says, you think most weathermen are boring? How can the weather be boring? It feeds us, the weather can destroy us, controls our daily life. I don't think that's boring.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
And related to that, he also says people ask when it will rain, but what about why does it rain? And why does the wind blow? Good
Yeah,
line.
yeah, yeah. I like it. I liked when only because it was sort of stereotypical. But when Stagg received that phone call saying that his pregnant wife might have been killed in the hospital
Yeah.
bombing, and then when he was asked what was wrong after he hung up the phone, he said, "Oh, it's nothing, it's irrelevant." And then he went right back to his role in war planning. It was like the epitome of the fabled British stiff upper lip.
Yeah. Except he loses that lip pretty soon. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a mess
well,
eventually.
he had a character arc, unlike the others.
Yeah. I didn't have to, fortunately, I was able to Google this. Ike's standby statement, if the invasion failed, he'd written this
Yes,
famously had written, a statement to use if the landings were terrible. He says, this is what he would have said. Our landings in Cherbourg Harbor area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn our troops. The decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best available information. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. I mean, it's impossible to imagine a national leader accepting blame for anything today. And it's just,
right.
it's like,
Yeah,
this is what you want, you know, your, this is what you want an American to be like, to be honest and,
yeah.
upright. And Eisenhower embodied that.
Not just a national leader, but a corporate leader,
Yeah, any leader.
anybody. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting when Montgomery said to Ike, "Do you want to be personally responsible for losing World War II?" That was his when Ike was going to delay. It
Yeah.
was over the top, but the friction between the two was historically accurate. And Montgomery was an interesting character. He had his own agenda, and that agenda was to have it be seen that it was Britain who would win the war. He wanted to race to Berlin to beat the Russians and plant the Union Jack there, whereas Ike was much more methodical and cautious. Um, Interesting, vain, egotistical character, but some thought that Monty was something of a chicken hawk, and that he required demanded overwhelming assets and force before he'd actually launch an attack. And military genius Ernest Hemingway called his signature martini a Montgomery because of its 10-to-1 gin versus vermouth ratio. And he was asked why. I said, well, because why a Montgomery? He says, because those are the odds that Monty always insisted upon before launching an attack. Just a little sideline.
That's pretty funny. This is my final favorite line of the movie is also equally famous and Googleable. It's the order of the troops to the day. It's a statement that Eisenhower made to the troops when they went out,
Yeah.
and in the movie you hear him doing this on the radio, kind of shouting a little bit more than Eisenhower probably really did do. But he said, "You're about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave soldiers and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking." Um,
Yeah,
so
great
eloquent
stuff.
in its simplicity, and
Yeah.
it sort of belies or puts a lie to the assertion that Eisenhower was not a good communicator. I mean, he knew how to communicate when he wanted to.
Yeah. No, as usual, we've noticed this before too. Some of the best lines are the real lines
Yeah, right.
spoken by historical figures. And I keep, I actually got angry at the end of the film, angry alongside my reaction about what tough times are really like
Yeah,
compared to our times today. It made me mad that people over dramatize tough times today compared to the way it was. And I know a lot of people are in really tough times, but 4,400 Allied soldiers died on that one day in D-Day. In our current war, 13 have died. And while every death matters, just think of the difference in scale that people and families had to deal with then compared to now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the relevance or comparison to politics and society today. How is this movie relevant? Why should we watch it?
Well, we should watch it mainly whether you're interested in D-Day or not, in what it reveals about leadership and about we're a society of experts and specializations, but when you're in a position of leadership, you'll find that often the experts split 50-50 and somebody's got to make the decisions. And so what it takes to be a leader making big decisions and also what real crisis looks like compared to today. Again, I don't mean to beat the drum, but that just, I actually got physically angry watching the end of this movie. And I was in the movie theater, so I had to restrain myself.
So, I would say that at heart, this movie is a debate about science and two different approaches. Crick's approach was to look at old weather maps and assume that if a weather front looked the same as today's weather, it would act the same as it did before. By contrast, Stagg used many, many data points on barometric pressure, wind speed, and temperature to make an individual prediction for each event. So the one thing that Stagg did that many of today's scientists don't do, though, is to admit that he couldn't know for sure if he was right.
Yeah.
So he used the science, the latest science, but wasn't an egomaniac and said he could predict something with 100%. I think it's relevant because it shows how science should work through slow incremental steps forward in knowledge and avoiding quackery, even if that delivers an answer that no one wants to hear.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Okay, so if you were a high school teacher, would you assign this movie?
Yes, I would. There's lots of history and lots of leadership lessons to be learned. I think it might be more accessible, more modernistic than the 3 hour plus black and white extravaganza, which is The Longest Day, a film that's also very good in its own way. So, yes, and there's nothing particularly offensive, except for maybe the smoking.
Yeah, that's right. I would say absolutely. I would, there are some profanities, which I don't know if you can get a bleeped version, but it brings to life a key moment in world history. And I would
Yeah.
definitely show this to, a 10th grade history class.
No profanities that all those 10th graders don't use multiple times
I know.
themselves.
Yeah. Well, if you're in a private school, you can get away with it. Um, let's grade the movie.
A minus. I thought it was a very good movie. I highly recommend it. It's already on its way to the streaming services, so I recommend giving it a watch.
I give it a B plus, which is only slightly lower than you. I also liked it. I would also recommend it. And yeah, when it gets to the streaming services, by all means, watch it. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this movie before we wrap up?
I like Ike.
I like Ike. Yeah.
Ike and Dick. Ike and Dick, sure to click. That was one of their slogans in the 50s. Good old 50s. Ike and Dick, sure to click.
All right. So just to remind everyone, the podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and most podcast platforms. Please, please, please subscribe there. If you have comments, send me an email at garyholmes76@gmail. I think we've talked about this. I don't know if we've confirmed it, but we talked about that our next movie was going to be another great president that has not had a movie written about him yet. That's George Washington. The movie's called Young Washington, and it will be in the theaters on July 3rd. So, you okay with us doing that next?
I'd love to do that. It's very appropriate
And now we have
for
to
for
go to
the.
the movies. We have to go to the movies again in the dark and
Oh
scribble
boy,
on our hand or something. So,
it's hard to write and eat a tub of popcorn at the same time.
all right. So let's say goodbye, and we'll see you in July.
All right. Take
Bye
care.
bye.